Changing for Governor Kasich, because originally it was, well, we're below the national average, so Ohio is a miracle, and Governor Kasich was saying he deserved all the credit for it. Okay, then we had the same unemployment rate as the rest of the country. Then it got a little bit harder to explain how we were doing better than the rest of the country. Now we're doing worse than the rest of the country. The unemployment rate hasn't been this bad since February of last year. So the governor has completely done a 180 in terms of what he says the current state of the economy is. It went from being a miracle a few months ago to being stalled out. And at least he's publicly admitting that, as he did on Meet the Press the other day. But the numbers coming out are bad news. That's on top of some very high-profile job losses, like the situation in Normet and some of the other plant closings. I mean, the fact is that he ran on an agenda that we were going to start outperforming the rest of the country. It's just not happening.
This is for both of you. At Governor Kasich's State of the State speech in Lima earlier this year, when it was bitter cold up there, after it was all over, I asked the Democrats, the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats who were there, how they were going to beat John Kasich. And there was a long pause. And finally, the answer was, well, he's going to beat himself. He's going to get his hand caught in the cookie jar. Is that your plan, to beat John Kasich, for him to beat himself, or do you have a more proactive plan?
No, I don't think you wait for somebody to self-destruct, although I say he has hurt himself in a number of ways with some of his policies. The way that you have to beat somebody is you have to explain why your agenda is different. And you've had an administration that has failed on the economy, that has cut funds to education, that has cut local government funds, that has had an economic development strategy that not only is not working, but is also secretive and is taking public money but saying it isn't the public's business. And we have to be able to articulate a different direction, and I think Senator Kearney is going to help me do that. Senator, you want to add anything to that?
Well, John, I think I answered the question a little bit differently, and I expressed optimism about the Democratic Party being able to produce a candidate that can beat John Kasich, and I think that's what we've done as a party, and that person is Ed FitzGerald.
Ed, were there other names on the table, and particularly did you look at Central Ohio, with no disrespect to my friend Senator Kearney, but I mean, were there other names in consideration?
Sure. Your name was on briefly. Okay, it was.
And went quickly.
You kept sending it in over and over again. We kept sending it back to you. No. We started out with a list actually of about 30, then we narrowed it down to about 15, then we got it down to about less than 10, then we started having really serious discussions, and we really did, though, Jim, we looked at really every geographic area except for Northeast Ohio. You do have to have, it's a big state, and you should have some geographic diversity. So I did rule out folks from my neck of the woods. There were a couple people that were very seriously considered in Central Ohio. Eric just stood out from the crowd. I mean, he's universally well respected in this town, and he is not a stranger to Columbus. He's worked as a state senator here. He'll be going into his eighth year or so in that capacity, and I think you'll see that he's established some pretty strong connections here too.
Part of the disadvantage, of course, of picking a sitting legislator is there is that voting record, Eric. Probably not majority a lot of times on key votes. Do you expect the Kasich people to come after you on your record? They're already talking about, you voted against the budget this year. That means you're for tax cuts. They cite your comments.
Wait, hold on. Let me jump in on that.
All right.
Because that budget increases taxes, and I want to be very clear about that. And it's that budget shows the inequities, and quite frankly, the continued inequities in the Kasich administration's approach. What they did was they raised taxes for virtually every Ohioan who spends money. By that I mean they increased the sales tax in our state. They also raised taxes on senior citizens because they pulled back the homestead tax reduction that Governor Strickland put in. So that budget was not a tax cut. I think, quite frankly, they're going to attack me on a lot of different things, but I hope they do talk about my voting record because I'm very proud of it, and I look forward to that debate.
Would you still characterize that budget as un-American?
Well, what I said, Jim can tell you this, I highlighted the inequities of the budget and how the tax policy favored those who are wealthy over the middle class. That's the whole gist of the argument. Jim was there and he can tell you about it.
Gentlemen, the governor was...
I was just going to say, what Eric said about the budget, it certainly isn't in the best traditions of Ohio, to cut taxes for people at the very top end of the income scale and finance that tax cut by raising taxes on the poorest people in the state. There's no tradition of that either in the United States or in this state, and Senator Kearney was right to call them out on it. Look, when Governor Kasich ran, you talk about people's records. When he ran in 2010, he did talk about cutting people's income taxes, and he has cut people's income taxes, but he never told them that he was going to do it by raising everybody's sales taxes. He financed the income tax cut by raising taxes on working people, and the senator was right to call him out on it, and we're going to continue to call him out on it all year long.
Ed, does the narrative of President Obama that things are getting better play opposite the way it did last year for Mitt Romney trying to say the state was getting worse with Governor Kasich at the helm? I mean, have you looked at that dynamic with the president coming in and saying things?
Yeah, but I mean, look, here's what Governor Kasich has said. Governor Kasich has said that his policies, in particular Jobs Ohio, was going to mean that Ohio was going to outperform the rest of the country. So the whole country has experienced some economic difficulty, but Governor Kasich's position was that just as he claimed that Governor Strickland had dragged down the state more than the national average, he was going to lift it more than the national average. So, and he was happy to make that argument, Jim, when the unemployment rate was lower than the national average. Now that it's higher, I don't know how he explains that. And so I think he's going to have a lot of difficulty explaining that, because the fact is the policies that he's implemented here have not brought us over the national average. You know, there are states in this country where all the jobs lost in the recession have been replaced. Well, we're at about 50% of the jobs that have been replaced, and a lot of the jobs that have replaced the jobs that were lost are minimum wage jobs that don't pay benefits. So if you ask people in Ohio, and believe me, I've been doing this, you know, in now 87 counties as of this weekend. One of the things I ask people is, and I've continued to do this in every single county, I'll just say, raise your hand if you agree with Governor Kasich that his policies have brought about an economic miracle in Ohio. I have yet to find a single person to raise their hand. So maybe the folks that Governor Kasich is associating with feel that way, but I don't think most people in Ohio do.
We've got time for one more question.
How do you think what's going on nationally is going to play in the governor's race next year? Republicans have already said that they're going to make the Affordable Care Act and the problems with the website a big deal. I mean, do you think you're going to be having to run against, you know, an unpopular president as well as Governor Kasich?
I think people are going to vote for the candidate for governor and lieutenant governor that they think represents the best interest of their family. And I think they understand that it's a vote for governor and it's not a vote for any other office. And the fact is that politicians that are serving in Washington right now are very unpopular. And it doesn't matter whether it's somebody on our side of the aisle or somebody on their side of the aisle. And I don't think necessarily that the president's poll numbers are helping me right now, but I don't think John Boehner's poll numbers, that are even worse, are helping his friend and former colleague in Congress, former Congressman Kasich. So I don't think either of us are going to be running around highlighting that too much. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to Ohio issues, and I think that's what's going to make the difference.
Do you think
we need to have an opportunity for them to go green, our supporters are.
Okay.
I was going to say, do you think the president's going to be campaigning for your ticket here in Ohio?
I think that national folks, whether it's Chris Christie or Ted Cruz or any of the Republican likely presidential candidates, I think they'll be here for John Kasich, and I think there'll be national folks that will come in for us too. Because it's going to be, just like it always does come down to Ohio, I mean, it's going to be a nationally, you know, have a high national profile, and I'm sure lots of folks will come in and campaign.